Have you ever had one of those moments where your entire world shifts in the span of a single notification? Where everything you thought you knew about yourself gets shattered by strangers on the internet who don't even know your name? I was 24, living in a studio apartment in downtown LA that was barely bigger than most people's walk-in closets. The rent was eating half my paycheck from my part-time job at a local coffee shop, but I didn't care. Every spare moment, every ounce of energy I had left after pulling double shifts, went into my YouTube channel. This was my shot. This was how I was going to make it. That Tuesday night in March started like any other. I just uploaded what I genuinely believed was my breakthrough video. 3 weeks of planning, countless hours of editing, pouring my heart into a motivational piece about chasing dreams when everyone tells you to be realistic. The thumbnail looked good. The title was catchy. And for the first time in months, I felt like I'd created something that could actually change lives. I remember sitting on my secondhand couch, the one with the spring that poked through the left cushion, watching the view count climb. 50 views became 500. 500 became 5,000. By midnight, I was staring at numbers I'd only dreamed of. 50,000 views and climbing. The algorithm had finally noticed me. This was it. This was my moment. But then I made the mistake every creator warns you never to make. I scrolled down to the comments section. The first few were encouraging, generic, but positive. Then I saw it. A comment with over 200 likes that made my stomach drop. Dude seriously needs to hit the gym before giving life advice. How can you motivate others when you can't even take care of yourself? I kept scrolling, hoping it was just one troll, one bitter person having a bad day. But comment after comment painted the same picture. Those dark circles are distracting. Maybe invest in some skincare before investing in camera equipment. Hard to take someone seriously when they look like they haven't slept in weeks. Each notification sound became a tiny dagger. My phone kept buzzing with new comments, new subscribers, new views. But all I could focus on were the words that confirmed my deepest fears about myself. The fears I'd been pushing down every time I looked in the mirror. Every time I caught my reflection in a storefront window while walking to work. I sat there until 4 in the morning, reading every single comment. The positive ones felt hollow, like people were just being polite. But the negative ones? Those felt like truth. Raw, unfiltered truth about who I really was beneath all my dreams and ambitions. When I finally looked up from my phone, the city lights outside my window had dimmed. LA was quieter now, but my mind was screaming. I walked to my bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror under those harsh fluorescent lights. The same face that had been excited about creating content just hours earlier now looked like a stranger. A tired, worn-down stranger who had been fooling himself into thinking he belonged in front of a camera. The worst part wasn't even the comments themselves. It was the realization that maybe they were right. Maybe I had been so focused on chasing this dream that I'd forgotten to take care of the person chasing it. Maybe authenticity wasn't enough if the authentic version of yourself wasn't what people wanted to see. I thought about all those other YouTubers with their perfect lighting, their flawless skin, their effortless confidence. They made it look so easy, so natural. Here I was, grinding 18-hour days between work and content creation. And it showed. Every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every moment of stress was written across my face like a roadmap of struggle. That night, lying in bed as the sun started to rise over the Hollywood hills, I wondered if I was fighting a battle I was never meant to win. In a city full of beautiful people chasing beautiful dreams, maybe there wasn't room for someone like me. Someone whose journey looked messy, whose face told the story of every sacrifice, every late night, every moment of doubt. The view count kept climbing. But I couldn't bring myself to look. Success had never felt so much like failure. You know what's worse than being criticized by strangers? Becoming your own harshest critic. That's exactly what happened in the weeks following that viral video. Every morning became a battle between the person I used to be and the person I thought I needed to become. I started my days differently now. Instead of jumping straight into content creation like I used to, I'd spend 20 minutes in front of my bathroom mirror, analyzing every flaw those comments had pointed out. The dark circles under my eyes seemed deeper, the slight asymmetry in my face more pronounced. Even my smile looked forced, like I was trying too hard to convince myself I belonged here. My local Target became my second home as I wandered the skincare aisles, reading reviews on my phone for products I couldn't afford. Ring lights, concealer, even those weird jade rollers that promised to reduce puffiness. I was grasping at anything that might transform me into someone more palatable for the camera. Someone who looked like they had their life together. But here's the cruel irony. The more I tried to fix my appearance, the worse my content became. I'd sit down to film, and immediately get distracted by how I looked in the viewfinder. Was the lighting flattering enough? Could you see the bags under my eyes? Did I look professional? Or just tired? The spontaneous energy that had driven my early videos was suffocating under layers of self-consciousness. My subscriber count started reflecting this internal struggle. The momentum from that viral video evaporated as my new uploads barely cracked 1,000 views. Comment sections that used to buzz with engagement became ghost towns. The algorithm that had briefly embraced me was already moving on to the next shiny thing. I remember one particularly brutal afternoon at the coffee shop where I worked. I was pulling espresso shots, going through the motions, when a regular customer started talking about YouTube creators with her friend. "They all look the same now," she said, stirring sugar into her latte. "Perfect teeth, perfect skin, perfect everything. Where's the authenticity? Where are the real people telling real stories?" Her words hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, desperately trying to join the ranks of those perfect creators, while real people were craving exactly what I'd been trying to erase about myself. The irony was suffocating. That evening I sat in my apartment staring at my camera setup. The ring light I'd splurged on cast this artificial glow that made everything look sterile, lifeless. I tried filming 3 different videos, but each attempt felt more hollow than the last. I was performing a version of myself that didn't exist, trying to be someone I thought people wanted to see instead of who I actually was. The breaking point came during a late-night editing session. I was watching footage of myself from 3 months earlier, before the viral video, before the comments, before I'd started this exhausting journey of self-improvement. The person on screen looked tired, yes, but he also looked alive, passionate, real. He spoke with conviction because he believed in what he was saying, not because he was worried about how he looked saying it. I paused the video and stared at that earlier version of myself. When had I stopped being him? When had I decided that his authenticity wasn't enough? The contrast was jarring. 3 months ago, I was creating content that mattered to me. Now I was creating content designed to avoid criticism, which is basically creating nothing at all. My phone buzzed with a notification from YouTube Analytics. My latest video had been live for 6 hours and had 37 views. 37. I'd gone from 50,000 views to 37, because I'd lost the very thing that made people want to watch in the first place. I walked to my window and looked out at the city sprawling below. Millions of people living their messy, imperfect lives, and here I was trying to pretend mine was any different. LA has this way of making you feel simultaneously invisible and exposed, like you're performing for an audience that isn't really watching. That night, I felt both. The worst part wasn't the declining views or the empty comment sections. It was the growing distance between who I was and who I was pretending to be. I'd started this channel to document the real journey of chasing dreams in America, the unglamorous truth behind the highlight reel. But somewhere along the way, I'd become exactly what I'd set out to challenge. I closed my laptop without uploading anything that night. For the first time in months, I went to bed early, but sleep didn't come. Instead, I lay there wondering if I'd already lost the thing I'd been trying so hard to protect. My authenticity, my voice, myself. The city hummed outside my window, full of other dreamers facing their own battles with self-doubt. I wondered how many of them were also lying awake, questioning whether they were enough exactly as they were. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. For me, it arrived on a Thursday morning in the form of an email that would completely reshape how I saw myself and my purpose. I was going through my usual morning routine of dreading the day ahead. My coffee had gone cold while I stared at my analytics dashboard, watching my latest video struggle to break 100 views. The comments section was a wasteland of silence, which somehow felt worse than the criticism. At least criticism meant people cared enough to respond. My inbox was the usual graveyard of promotional emails and spam, but one subject line stopped me cold. "Thank you for being real." The sender was listed as Sarah M., and something about the simplicity of those 5 words made me click immediately. What I found inside wasn't just an email. It was 3 pages of handwritten text, carefully scanned and attached with the kind of attention to detail that told me this wasn't some casual fan mail. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, like someone had taken real time to craft each word. "Dear Creator," it began, and I could already tell this was different. No username, no casual internet speak. This felt personal in a way that made my chest tighten. Sarah introduced herself as a 19-year-old pre-med student at Ohio State University. She wrote about discovering my channel 6 months earlier, during what she called the worst semester of my life. Her parents had pushed her toward medicine, but she was struggling with organic chemistry, feeling like an imposter among classmates who seemed naturally brilliant. But here's what stopped me breathing. She specifically mentioned my appearance in those early videos. Not as criticism, but as comfort. "You looked tired," she wrote, "but not in a way that made me worry about you. You looked tired in the way that told me you understood what it meant to work for something that mattered. Your dark circles weren't a flaw. They were proof that you were grinding toward your dreams, just like I was grinding through my textbooks at 3 in the morning." I had to put the letter down. My hands were actually shaking. For months, I'd been seeing my exhaustion as something to hide, something that made me less worthy of being heard. But Sarah saw it as evidence of dedication, of authenticity in a world full of people pretending everything was effortless. She continued, "When you talked about struggling to make rent while chasing your YouTube dreams, I felt less alone in my tiny dorm room, surviving on ramen and coffee while my roommate went to parties I couldn't afford. When you showed your messy apartment in the background, I stopped being embarrassed about my cluttered desk. You made imperfection feel normal, even admirable." The letter went on for pages, detailing specific moments from my videos that had helped her through panic attacks, family pressure, and academic struggles. She quoted things I'd said that I'd completely forgotten, moments where I'd been vulnerable about my own doubts and fears. But the paragraph that broke me was near the end. "I noticed your recent videos are different. You look polished now, professional. But something's missing. The person who helped me believe I could survive pre-med while staying true to myself seems to be hiding behind perfect lighting and careful angles. I miss the real you, the one who looked like he'd been up all night working towards something bigger than himself." She ended with words that I've memorized. "The world doesn't need another perfect influencer telling us how easy success can be. It needs more real humans willing to show that meaningful work is messy, exhausting, and absolutely worth it. Please don't change the very thing that makes you special." I sat in my kitchen for 20 minutes after reading that letter, just staring at the wall. This stranger from Ohio had seen something in me that I'd been trying to erase. She'd found strength in what I considered weakness, inspiration in what I thought was failure. The timing felt almost cosmic. Just when I was ready to give up on authenticity altogether, here was proof that authenticity was exactly what someone needed. Not just someone, but a 19-year-old kid fighting her own battles, finding courage in my imperfections. I read the letter 3 more times, each pass revealing new layers of insight. Sarah wasn't asking me to be perfect. She was asking me to be real. She wasn't criticizing my appearance. She was celebrating what it represented. The exhaustion, the struggle, the visible evidence of someone refusing to give up. For the first time in months, I looked at my reflection and saw something different. Not flaws to be fixed, but stories to be told. Not imperfections to hide, but humanity to share. My tired eyes weren't a liability. They were proof of persistence. My imperfect setup wasn't unprofessional. It was relatable. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I set up my camera without checking my appearance first. No ring light, no careful angles, no concealer. Just me, my story, and the understanding that somewhere out there, someone needed to see that it was okay to look tired while chasing extraordinary dreams. If this story is hitting you in a way that feels familiar, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next didn't just change my content, it changed my entire relationship with authenticity. And if you've ever felt like your imperfections disqualify you from your dreams, drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Change doesn't always announce itself with fireworks and dramatic revelations. Sometimes it whispers its way into your life so quietly that you almost miss it happening. That's exactly how my transformation began. Not with a complete overhaul, but with the smallest shift in perspective that would ripple through everything. I printed Sarah's letter that same afternoon. Not because I'm sentimental, but because I needed something tangible to remind me of what I'd almost lost. I taped it right next to my bathroom mirror, where I'd see it every morning before filming. Those 3 pages became my daily dose of reality, a reminder that authenticity wasn't my weakness, but my strength. The first video I made after reading her letter felt different from the moment I pressed record. Instead of my usual apology for looking tired, I said something that surprised even me. It's been a long week grinding toward this goal, and honestly, it shows. But that's what real progress looks like. The response wasn't immediate or overwhelming, but it was genuine. Comments started trickling in from people who seemed relieved to see someone acknowledge the messy reality behind the dream. "Finally, someone who looks like they're actually working for it," wrote one viewer. Another said, "This is the most honest content I've seen all year." But the real change wasn't happening in the comments section. It was happening inside me, in those quiet moments between takes when I'd catch my reflection and feel something I hadn't experienced in months. Acceptance. Not resignation, but genuine acceptance of who I was in this moment of my journey. I started sharing more of the behind-the-scenes reality that I'd been carefully editing out. The rejection emails from potential sponsors who thought my channel was too niche. The nights when I questioned whether I was delusional for thinking I could make this work. The grocery store trips where I calculated every purchase because my budget was stretched thinner than tissue paper. My apartment stayed messy in the background because that's what real life looks like when you're building something from nothing. My hair remained imperfect because I was more focused on the message than the messenger. My dark circles told the story of someone who chose dreams over sleep, and for the first time, I wore them like badges of honor rather than marks of shame. The shift was subtle but profound. Views started climbing again. Not because I looked better, but because I felt more aligned with my purpose. People could sense the difference, even if they couldn't articulate what had changed. There was an energy in my videos that had been missing, a confidence that came not from perfection, but from authenticity. I remember one particular evening, about 3 weeks after receiving Sarah's letter, when I was editing a video about dealing with failure. I watched myself on screen talking about a collaboration that had fallen through, and instead of cringing at my appearance, I found myself proud of the vulnerability I was showing. This person on screen looked tired, yes, but he also looked real, honest, human. The comments on that video were different too. Instead of surface-level encouragement, people were sharing their own stories of failure and persistence. A single mom talked about going back to school while working 2 jobs. A recent graduate shared his struggle with student loans while trying to start a business. My comment section was becoming a support group for dreamers who didn't fit the polished mold. But perhaps the most significant change was in how I slept. For months, I'd been lying awake replaying negative comments, analyzing my flaws, planning ways to improve my appearance. Now I was sleeping the deep, satisfied sleep of someone aligned with their purpose. I wasn't performing a version of myself anymore. I was simply being myself, and that authenticity was exhausting in the best possible way. My morning routine transformed too. Instead of spending 20 minutes scrutinizing my reflection, I'd read Sarah's letter and remind myself why I started creating content in the first place. Not to look perfect, but to tell stories that mattered. Not to impress strangers, but to connect with people who needed to hear that their imperfect journey was valid too. The irony wasn't lost on me. By trying to fix what I thought was broken, I'd actually broken what was working. My authenticity, my relatability, my willingness to show the unglamorous side of chasing dreams. That's what had drawn people to my channel in the first place. In attempting to become more appealing to critics, I'd become less appealing to the people who actually mattered, those who saw themselves in my struggle. 3 months after that viral video that had triggered my identity crisis, I was creating content that felt more like me than anything I'd produced before. Not because I'd changed who I was, but because I'd remembered who I'd always been. A dreamer willing to show that the path to success isn't pretty, it's persistent. The numbers were climbing again, but more importantly, the connection was real. People weren't just watching my videos, they were finding pieces of themselves in my story. And that, I realized, was worth more than all the perfect lighting and flawless skin in the world. What if everything you've been told about success is backwards? What if the very things you're trying to hide are exactly what the world needs to see? This realization didn't hit me like lightning. It grew slowly, like dawn breaking over a landscape I'd been stumbling through in darkness. 6 months after Sarah's letter changed everything, I found myself sitting in that same Starbucks where I'd once overheard customers lamenting the lack of authentic creators. But this time, I was the one being discussed. 2 college students at the next table were talking about a video I'd posted the week before, one where I'd broken down crying while discussing a major setback in my channel's growth. "That's what real looks like," one of them said. "He didn't try to hide it or make it pretty. He just showed us what it actually feels like when your dreams get crushed and you have to decide whether to give up or keep going." I wanted to turn around and tell them I was sitting right there, but instead I listened as they talked about how my willingness to be vulnerable had given them permission to be honest about their own struggles. These weren't just viewers. They were people finding courage in my imperfections. That's when it crystallized for me. We've created this impossible mythology around success, where everyone has to look like they stepped out of a magazine to have something valuable to say. But the most powerful voices in my life, the teachers who changed my trajectory, the mentors who shaped my thinking, the friends who carried me through dark seasons, none of them looked perfect. They looked real. Think about the person who had the biggest positive impact on your life. I'm willing to bet they didn't have flawless skin or perfect lighting when they spoke truth into your situation. They probably looked tired sometimes, stressed sometimes, human all the time. Their power came not from their appearance, but from their authenticity, their willingness to show up as they were rather than as they thought they should be. This revelation transformed how I saw not just my own journey, but the entire landscape of content creation. We're drowning in a sea of highlight reels, carefully curated moments designed to make everyone else feel inadequate. But what if the antidote to that cultural poison is exactly what I'd been trying to hide? What if my dark circles, my messy apartment, my visible exhaustion were actually revolutionary acts of honesty? I started thinking about Sarah, still grinding through pre-med at Ohio State, probably pulling all-nighters and questioning whether she belonged there. How many other Sarahs were out there, scrolling through social media at 3 in the morning, feeling like failures because they didn't look effortless while chasing extraordinary dreams? The message became clear. Your imperfections aren't bugs in your system, they're features. Your tired eyes tell the story of someone who refuses to give up. Your imperfect setup shows you're more focused on substance than style. Your authentic self, messy and real and human, is exactly what someone out there desperately needs to see. I remember filming a video about this realization, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was saying something that mattered, not because it was perfectly delivered or beautifully lit, but because it was true. I talked about how we've been conditioned to believe that struggle should be hidden, that the journey toward our dreams should look effortless and Instagram ready. But real life isn't Instagram ready. Real life is messy apartments and dark circles and moments of doubt that hit you at 2 in the morning when you're questioning everything you've worked for. Real life is choosing to show up anyway, imperfect and tired and absolutely determined to keep going. The response to that video was unlike anything I'd experienced. People weren't just commenting, they were confessing, sharing stories they'd never told anyone about their own struggles with perfectionism, their own battles with feeling not good enough, not polished enough, not ready enough to pursue their dreams. A single mother wrote about how she'd been putting off starting her business because she didn't have a professional headshot. A recent graduate shared that he'd been avoiding networking events because he couldn't afford the right clothes. A teenager talked about delaying her YouTube channel because she thought her room wasn't aesthetic enough. These weren't isolated cases. These were symptoms of a culture that had convinced an entire generation that they needed to look perfect before they could do meaningful work, that they needed to have it all figured out before they could share their journey. That authenticity was somehow less valuable than aesthetic. But here's what I learned from Sarah's letter and from every person who found courage in my imperfections. The world doesn't need more perfect people pretending life is easy. It needs more real humans willing to show that meaningful work is hard, that dreams require sacrifice, that success often looks nothing like what we see on social media. Your messy journey isn't something to apologize for. It's something to celebrate. Because somewhere out there, someone is looking for proof that they don't have to be perfect to be worthy, that they don't have to have it all together to start moving toward their dreams. That person needs to see your tired eyes, your imperfect setup, your authentic struggle. They need to know that extraordinary things can come from ordinary people who refuse to let their imperfections stop them from pursuing extraordinary dreams. What started as a crisis of confidence became the foundation for something I never expected: a movement. Not the kind with hashtags and viral moments, but the quiet, powerful kind that happens when real people connect over shared truths that nobody talks about. A year after Sarah's letter arrived in my inbox, my channel had transformed into something completely different from what I'd originally envisioned. Instead of just documenting my journey toward YouTube success, it had become a sanctuary for anyone who'd ever felt like they weren't polished enough, perfect enough, or ready enough to chase their dreams. The community that grew around this message of authentic imperfection was unlike anything I'd experienced. Comment sections became support groups. People shared their failures alongside their victories. Someone would post about getting rejected from their dream job, and dozens of others would respond with their own rejection stories and how they'd pushed through. It wasn't toxic positivity or empty encouragement. It was real people acknowledging that the path to meaningful success is messy, exhausting, and absolutely worth it. I started receiving letters, not just emails, physical letters from people who took the time to write by hand, like Sarah had. A veteran talked about struggling with PTSD while trying to start a nonprofit. A teacher shared her journey of going back to school for her master's degree while raising 3 kids. A teenager wrote about pursuing art despite his parents' pressure to choose something more practical. Each letter reinforced the same truth. People weren't looking for perfection. They were looking for permission. Permission to be tired while working toward their dreams. Permission to struggle visibly. Permission to show up as they were, not as they thought they should be. But the moment that truly crystallized the impact of this mission came 6 months ago. I was speaking at a small conference about authentic content creation when a young woman approached me afterward. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her until she smiled and said, "I'm Sarah, from Ohio." The Sarah, the pre-med student whose letter had changed everything. She was in her final year now, still tired, still grinding, but radiating a confidence I recognized. It was the confidence that comes from accepting yourself completely, while refusing to settle for anything less than your dreams. "You saved my channel," I told her, but she shook her head. "You saved yourself," she replied. "I just reminded you who you already were." We talked for an hour about her journey through medical school, about the moments when she'd wanted to quit, about how seeing someone else embrace their imperfections had given her permission to embrace her own. She told me about study groups where students now openly discussed their struggles instead of pretending everything was effortless, about how authenticity had become contagious in her program. That conversation made me realize we'd built something bigger than a YouTube channel. We'd created proof that authenticity isn't just valuable, it's revolutionary. In a world obsessed with highlight reels, showing your behind-the-scenes reality becomes an act of rebellion. In a culture that demands perfection, embracing your imperfections becomes a form of leadership. Today, when I look at my channel analytics, the numbers tell a story I never expected. Not just growth in subscribers or views, but engagement that runs deeper than likes and comments. People aren't just watching, they're changing. They're starting businesses from their messy apartments. They're pursuing dreams despite not having perfect headshots. They're showing up authentically in a world that told them to wait until they were ready. The mission has evolved beyond just my content. It's become about creating space for real humans to tell real stories about the unglamorous journey toward extraordinary dreams. It's about proving that your worth isn't measured by your polish, your value isn't determined by your perfection, and your voice matters exactly as it is. Sarah, if you're watching this, thank you. Not just for the letter that changed my trajectory, but for having the courage to see strength in what I considered weakness. Your words didn't just save my channel. They helped me remember that authenticity isn't something to apologize for. It's something to celebrate. And to everyone else who's ever felt like they don't fit the mold, like they're not ready enough or polished enough to pursue their dreams, this community exists for you. We're not here to pretend the journey is easy or that success looks pretty. We're here to show that meaningful work is messy, that dreams require sacrifice, and that the most powerful voices often come from the most unexpected places. So here's my invitation. Subscribe to join our mission of keeping it real in a filtered world. Hit that like button if you believe that authenticity beats perfection every time. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that they're enough exactly as they are. And comment below. Tell me about a time when someone's imperfection made them more inspiring, more human, more real to you. Because we're not just building a YouTube channel here. We're building a movement that says your tired eyes tell a story worth hearing. Your imperfect setup shows you prioritize substance over style, and your authentic journey is exactly what someone out there needs to see. Welcome to the real revolution. Let's change the world, one authentic story at a time. Your imperfections are your superpowers. Never forget that.